Coming up on today's Locked On Senators. It was a good news day at Senators practice in Stockholm. Artem Zub, a full participant in practice.
And with the Sens in Stockholm, we take a look at the top 5 Swedes in Senators history.
Plus a Sens Central Citizen and more. This is the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Welcome inside episode 917 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. You can follow the show on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, lockedon.senators on Instagram. The show is free and available on all podcast platforms, including on YouTube, where a like, comment, and subscription go a long way to helping the show grow. Today is Wednesday, November 15th, and Pilsy, we've made it to the day before an Ottawa Senators game day. Can you believe it?
I mean, yeah, it feels like forever ago, but at least, Ross, we got some fun news, some fun content trickling out from the Senators in Sweden. So that's just enough to keep us going here. But tomorrow's game up against the Red Wings cannot be watered down by how long this break has been. It's a big game.
Remember, tomorrow's Locked On Senators early drop, 5 a.m. Eastern. We're going to schedule it for so you can get all caught up on a game day preview. And our guy Matt with SensCentral podcast is over one of hundreds. There's hundreds of us over in Sweden. Sens fans being able to take part in the morning skate today, the practice that the Senators had at Avicii Arena. So I want to get Matt's take on how that all came to be. Did the Senators reach out individually? How did that all come about? So we'll have that conversation tomorrow. We've also got a great Sens Central Citizen coming up in today's show. But Pilsy, I want to start with some stick taps here for Artem Zub, battling back, full participant in practice. DJ Smith says he looks good. It cannot be overstated how important Artem Zub is to how this D-corps looks as a whole.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is underselling it, Ross. I think Sens fans know how important he is. And it's like the age-old problem the Senators have had, trying to find the right partner for Thomas Chabot. Now it's, all right, Chabot's out. We need the right partner for Jake Sanderson. And Artem Zub seems to be that guy. So it's great that Zub is back, especially, Ross, when you're dealing with head injuries, ear injury, whatever's the exact term going on with Zub.
Upper body.
Yeah, we'll call it a upper body injury, Ross. I'm sure flying overseas and dealing with time change and having all of that going on doesn't make any of that easier. So for Zub to be pushing through and looking like he's going to be a part of the game tomorrow is a big sign. So stick taps to Zub for sure.
The Ottawa Senators might also get a boost when they get back from Sweden, as Thomas Chabot came out on the ice with a non-contact jersey right at the end, but taking shots. That's a good sign for a guy with a broken hand. So that would just, talk about elevating back to what we expected at the start of the year. But considering half of their D-corps was injured last week, to get Brandstrom, then Zub, and now potentially Chabot back in the next week or two, that would be a huge boost, as it's been 2 weeks plus. It's been 3 weeks tomorrow since Chabot suffered that injury.
Yeah, and I believe his timeline was 4 to 6 weeks when it initially happened. So yeah, if he could come back for that Islanders game, their first game back, that would be huge. I think, Ross, it's probably going to be the next stretch of games, whether it's the Florida game or the back-to-back that happens after.
That would be kind of not ironic, but he got hurt in the last time they played the Islanders. So it'd be bookended with both Islanders games. We can pull up the practice lines as well here. Not a whole lot changed, and we do have confirmation as the Senators took a photo at center ice. We were kind of discussing it yesterday on the show, whether or not Mark Kastelik, Ridley Gregg were overseas with the team. The answer is no guy. They are not, as the Sens all took that great photo right at center ice where you've got the logo there as well, the global series, and really cool to see that take shape. But unfortunately, those injured guys will have to stay back and take care of the homestead. But the lines at practice are as follows. I think people are going to be really excited to see how this top 6 in particular is shaking out, because for the first time, we finally get it. Vladimir Tarasenko with Brady Tkachuk on the same line. 2 power wingers, great shooters. Obviously, Brady better in tight. And then you got Josh Norris in the middle there. Norris has to get it going here at 5-on-5. So what an opportunity for those 3 to keep clicking. Tim Stützle at center with Mathieu Joseph and Claude Giroux. Roby Järventie back between Dominic Kubalik and Drake Batherson. And then Rourke Chartier is centering a line of Matthew Highmore and Parker Kelly. On the back end, Jake Sanderson with Artem Zub, Jacob Chikrin with Jacob Bernard-Docker, Eric Brandstrom with Travis Hamonic, and then the 2 goalies, you got the Swede and the Finn. You got Anton Forsberg and Jonas Korpisalo. We'll get into starting goalies, everything on tomorrow's show. Nothing's been announced as of yet. But Pilsy, I was looking up some stats here as the final segment. We're going to talk about the all-time Swedish Sens, the best Swedes in Senators history. And I stumbled upon a pretty impressive fact. So I'm going to hit you with a little trivia here.
Oh, great.
Where does Jacob Chikrin rank among all-time Senators defensemen in points per game?
It's got to be in the top 10.
It's easily in the top 10.
I'll say 4th.
Higher.
2nd.
2nd behind Erik Karlsson.
Wow. I mean, that really, when you think about it, shouldn't be that surprising. Like, the way he's been able to put up points in the short amount of time that he's been here has been pretty incredible.
Yeah, 17 points in 25 games. That's good for a points per game of 0.68. He's just a shade under Drake Batherson and Josh Norris, who are both tied at the hip. Norris is 0.699, and Batherson is 0.696. So those two just still attached to the hip, but no longer attached as line mates, as DJ Smith basically just flipped Tarasenko and Batherson here as he's trying to get some consistency with the other lines outside of the Stützle, Joseph, and Giroux combo. What stands out to you of this lineup?
Well, that's what we were calling for, Ross, was for Tarasenko and Batherson to be flipped here. I think the way these lines are constructed, obviously that 4th line is not what anyone envisioned to start the year off. I don't think anyone really had Chartier or Highmore being a part of it, but Chartier certainly has earned his spot. The fire helmet holder right now, I hope he booked extra luggage to bring that over, and you got Matthew Highmore playing there for a couple games, so that's all right. But the big thing, Ross, is seeing that ZUB up there on the pairing with Sanderson. Seeing Zub there is such a good feeling. It just warms every Senators fan's soul, being like, oh, Zub is here. Zuby, as Pierre Dorion would say.
Jacob Bernard-Docker, by the way, interesting statistic, leads all Senators with 31 block shots. 31 block shots. That's like top 10 in the National Hockey League. Forget about just on the Ottawa Senators. And, of course, he hasn't even played in every single game. So I think that that's worth the little stick taps there. Of course, JBD is still trying to find his regular footing here as a National Hockey League defenseman. But if you're going to find a role, as we've always kind of said, JBD kind of struggles to find that one thing that he's going to elevate and be a lead at. Well, if he's just going to put himself in, the line of fire there, I think that that's a pretty commendable thing. So Jacob Bernard-Docker will be watching for that here as the Swedish series continues. As the Swedish week continues, it's been a while since we had our last Sens Central Citizen, Pilsy. Yeah. We had Doodling Daryl on a couple weeks ago, our guy. And tomorrow we're going to have another one. So a little back-to-back and set the stage for you in Sweden. Lots of great content coming. So let's get to that Sens Central Citizen next. You're listening to Locked On Senators.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Jace Medical. Guys, we spend a lot of time talking together, you and I. We get fired up together, whether we vent or vibe after the games. I'm thankful for that connection we have. And today, I want our chat to be a little more personal. I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply on ED medications. You realize what that means? Bring on extended travel. Everyone going to Sweden, you don't have to worry about having your medication. You are covered. Don't worry about whether you can refill your generics for Cialis, Viagra, or Revatio prescription. And all this is possible because of our friends at Jace Medical. Go online right now at jacemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. You're set for the entire year. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. If you or someone you love would like to get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily med, go to jacemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of the board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from the physicians on any treatment-related questions. Doctor created, doctor recommended. Don't be caught unprepared, guys. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jace handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Guys, check it out today at jacemedical.com. Promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Farm to Fork, farmtoforkdelivery.ca. It's a premium meat and seafood delivery service servicing Ontario, Quebec, and even our friends up north in Nunavut. First and foremost, Farm to Fork meats are absolutely delicious. Just go look at their average 5.0 stars review on Google. It's all natural products. It's antibiotic and hormone free. They're ethically raised. And how do they get them so perfectly flash frozen and fresh? Well, that's just it. After being hand cut at the butcher's table, they get flash frozen and then individually vacuum packed. So that way you only have to take out what you need and it seals in all the freshness that your little heart desires. They've got the steaks. You know, I love my ribeyes. You can get the ribeyes. You can get the steak mix pack. You can always check out the specials and the bundles that are going on at farmtoforkdelivery.ca. And the beauty of farmtoforkdelivery.ca too is you don't even have to get out of your house coat. You don't even have to get out of, your comfies. You can just hang out and have it delivered right to your door. It's convenient delivery. And what's great too is that Farm to Fork makes sure to let you know when your order is on your way. They give you the estimated time. All good at farmtoforkdelivery.ca. Because you're a listener of Locked On Senators, use our code LOSP10 for 10% off your first purchase. LOSP10. 10% off your first purchase. Farmtoforkdelivery.ca. Taste the Farm to Fork difference. You will never go back to grocery store meats. All right, let's get to this week's Sens Central Citizen. All right, we now welcome on this week's Sens Central Citizen. We're heading out to the left coast to Vancouver, BC, where we bring on Colin. Colin, what's going on out there, brother?
Not a lot, bright and early here in Vancouver. Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, we're happy to have you, man. So out in Vancouver, you're telling us you grew up in Kelowna. What's the connection to the Ottawa area and the Senators, and how did you become a fan?
Well, actually, so originally from Ottawa, moved out west in the early 90s with the folks, but kind of just became a fan of the team through my parents. They go way back, connections with the team. So my dad actually went down to Florida during the original expansion period for the Senators. So he was part of that welcoming committee. They did
Nice.
the picket line and stuff like that. And then I actually have a little show and tell. Here's my mom, my dad, and my oldest brother on the cover of the Sun in 1994 at the Civic Center whenever they celebrated the expansion. So I still have those original jerseys too, which I'm saving onto for a retirement investment.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That looks like it's in amazing condition. For when did you say that's from? 94?
Yeah, this one's from actually 1990. So it was before the team was even official. Yeah.
So your folks are day zero Sens fans then, eh? Not even day one.
Yeah, day zero. My dad's got some wild stories from the event down in Florida too. Even he said that the mayor came down with the Ottawa Fire Department. They had a fire department marching band, and they actually rented out a Hooters. And he said that later on, after the expansion was announced, the mayor showed up stumbling drunk out of the limousine, and he said it was the wildest party.
I mean, what a weird event too. Celebrating ice hockey team in Ottawa being announced, but of course you got to do that in Florida. Where else would you do that? So that's wild, and I love that that they're on the front page of the Sun there, and there's something so special about those jerseys that ended up like that was the marketing scheme. Look at these nice jerseys, and they didn't use them for a single game. So having those memories, that's pretty OG stuff for Sens fans right there, Colin.
That's a rare sports relic too. When I wear them to games here, I get a lot of second looks.
Is that your favorite jersey, or is it just how meaningful it is to you?
It's probably the most valuable one I have, but my favorite one's the black O. I love that one, honestly. And a quick note on jerseys, man. Like I've been waiting 34 years for them to have a full barber pole. Like we need to go back to the full vintage original Senator barber pole with the O logo. I know Binghamton did it, I think, for one season. Those are the sharpest looking jerseys I've ever seen.
Yeah, 67s, that's right up your alley too then. And Belleville's got a not quite full barber pole, but they're definitely on the stripe train. The Belleville jerseys are definitely awesome. Now, Colin, you mentioned Ross, go ahead.
Well, I just got show and tell myself here. This is the one Colin's talking about. If you haven't seen them yet on YouTube,
definitely
so sharp. Like you almost think they've got to be made out of that sweater material, though. And if that's the case, these guys might be a little slow by the third period. They might be sweating buckets out there.
Yeah, if those are the true sheep wool material, like they look like, you're logging a lot of sweat. You're carrying a lot of extra weight around there. But Colin, I wanted to ask, like, moving so early in your life to British Columbia, was there ever any temptation to switch over to the Canucks? Were all your friends Canucks fans? They're like, what's up with this Senators fan? What's going on here? Or not really? I feel like Kelowna's in that weird spot of BC where they don't necessarily claim Vancouver, but then also they're not quite close enough to Calgary or Edmonton to feel geographically obliged to that area too. How did that all go down?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's definitely a split between Edmonton and Vancouver, mostly, I'd say. But I think what happened was early on, as I befriended a couple Leafs fans, and it sort of galvanized my fandom with the Sens. So for better or for worse, it definitely stuck. And yeah, I mean, no, I never really was tempted at all. I've just been all Sens all the way.
So who was your first favorite Senator?
This might be a bit off the board, but I really liked Mike Fisher growing up.
Nice.
Yeah, he was just a hard-nosed guy, like a real soul player, grinded in the corners, was super well defensively, provided secondary scoring. I loved that he married Carrie Underwood. She's a babe, I guess. Carrie Fisher, Carrie Underwood. Yeah, so that was always a bonus.
Yeah,
although it did end up leading him to Nashville in the end, but whatever.
Yeah. And he's developed his southern accent, which is one of the funniest things of all time.
Has he really? That's hilarious.
Yeah, I think he was on with Wally last year, and he literally sounds like he just walked out of Middle Tennessee, tiny little hick town. It's hilarious to go check that out. But, man, he was the prototypical power forward, which you'd usually see as a wing, but playing down the middle, it was always you had the skill in Jason Spezza. So to be able to contrast that with a guy like Mike Fisher was always good. I'm always surprised at how many points he put up. I mean, longevity obviously played a little bit into that as well. But when you look at the height of his career, man, over 50 points consistently, always a 20-goal guy. And yeah, brought that heart and soul. I like that. That's a good call. So he was obviously a part of the team for a long time, from 99 all the way to 2011. What was your thoughts when they traded him? Obviously, it was a rebuild, but were you hoping that he'd stick around through it?
Yeah, I was hoping he'd be one of those Sens for life kind of guys. I know him and Neil were really close too. And, all of those classics like Spezza, Alfie, Phillips, Neil, Fisher. I wanted all those guys to stick around for the rest of their career. Obviously, you can't keep all of them, but it was disappointing, but like you said, it was a rebuild, so you couldn't really stay attached to too many guys. And he ended up going on to the finals there. I think it was in 2017, the year that we should have went. So that year I was, as disappointed as I was that we missed it by a goal, I was happy that he had a shot at it, and I was cheering for Nashville for sure. It would have sucked to have to beat him in the finals, but I would have enjoyed it either way.
Yeah, because they had he might have even been hurt at that point, because they were hobbling to the finals, and I'm
pretty sure Fisher, he only came in midway through the season. Nashville was like, dude, we are desperate. Please come out of retirement.
Exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, that was 36 years. That would have been such a great storyline. Like, that's probably my biggest regret as a Sens fan, is not getting that one bounce in Game 7. Not only to get to the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time in 10 years, second time in franchise history, but to be able to go up against such a depleted team. Like, it just felt like the everything was waiting. Like the sundae was made. You just needed the spoon, and instead they just knocked the sundae right off the table and it all spilt down on the floor. But this is going to be a depressing question, but I've now thought about it. What's your biggest Sens heartbreak?
I mean, that's probably the one right there, the 2017 Eastern Conference Final. I was watching it with my brother, and like you just kind of hinted to, Ross, like I felt like Nashville was going to be an easy win. I thought as long as we pushed through Pittsburgh, and I think they only brought in Matt Murray for like game 6 and 7, or maybe it was game 5, 6, and 7.
It was game 3, because remember it was the first home game. They put up 4 on Flower.
And that's right.
The last one was a Zach Smith wraparound. You can't be letting in Zach Smith wraparounds in the conference finals.
Totally. And to that point, like we had, I don't think Murray had played very much, like even at the end of the regular season. So I was like, oh, this is it. We're punching our ticket to the finals. And well, we all know what happened. And it ended up being a pretty booze-filled night after that happened. And it wasn't exactly the proudest night of my life in terms of Senators lore.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Colin. That was a rough one for Ross and I. Now, you're in BC, living in Vancouver now. Are you a part of the group that makes it out to every Sens game when they're playing in Vancouver? Ross and I have always mentioned, like, it seems like there's a lot of Sens fans that make it out to those Vancouver games. There
definitely is. I'm always surprised every time I go to Vancouver, or the Canucks game, and see how many Sens fans there are, especially in warm-ups. Like the away team's end is just packed full of kids and parents cheering on the Sens. It's awesome. And that's one of the best parts about being like a small market team. It's always kind of like us against the world sort of mentality. And every time you cross a Sens fan, it's always like, I see you.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Sens anywhere other than in Vancouver?
I've seen them in Ottawa, obviously, a few times. I still have my oldest brother lives out there, so I usually try and catch a game every time I go down there. Last year, I saw the Philly game where the Cat won it in overtime. That was later in the season. I think it was in March.
That was when you got in the scrap too.
Yeah,
that was a good one. Usually just Ottawa and Vancouver, nowhere else yet. Maybe Winnipeg one day. I go there 4 days a year, so I'll check a game out there.
That's a good halfway point too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now we talked a lot about the nostalgia and history and stuff. So let's get to today's team, Colin. What's you got any hot takes about the team today? I'll go this way to keep it current. How are you feeling about the Sweden trip? Is this Sweden trip, or are you like, oh man, it's going to be the curse of the Sweden trip again? Or you feel a little more optimistic about it?
I'm feeling a bit more optimistic. I mean, after the Leafs game and the Canucks game and the Calgary Flames game, I'm like, if we had some of those stinker games where the effort just wasn't there and we were getting, outshot and it just didn't look good. We were getting hemmed into our own zone. And I know we didn't win the Canucks game, but I feel like we played a solid game, and we outshot them like crazy, and sure, they capitalized on some stupid mistakes on our end. But, if we can just button down those, then I think we're looking okay. And I think the team's gelling now, and they've moved past the noise. So I'm feeling pretty confident going into this. As long as we can keep up those consistent efforts, the puck will start going in for us. And Corpy looks great, so keep rolling with him.
Yeah, seriously. So, I mean, this might be a rude question to follow up on, but like, do you start Corpy with both games this weekend, or you have to give Forsberg one back in his home country?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I know you guys were having the whole Scandinavia debate the other day too, but I feel like Corpy's probably got a lot of family in the stands too, being so close to Finland. But I would go Corpy both games. I feel like he's the hot hand. I know Forsberg, you want to get him mixed in there and you don't want to, override Corpy, but I feel like at the stage of the game that we're in right now, still second in the East, I think you've just got to get wins, and Corpy gives you the best chance to win.
Yeah, that's a business decision there. It pains me to hear, Colin, but I do respect it. You got to do whatever it takes to win here. I'm still giving Corpy the start against Minnesota, though. I believe he's going to change things around.
Forsberg.
Forsberg. Yes, sorry, Forsberg. He's going to turn things around in Sweden in front of his family and friends. Now, last question for me, Colin. This has been a blast. Always great to chat with SensCentral citizens, especially ones that are not living in Ottawa anymore. Not really a question, but my classic. I'll just open the floor up to you. If we missed anything, or you seemed like one of the citizens that came prepared with props. I always love seeing that. So just wanted to give the floor to you if there's anything we missed.
No, this is great. I mean, I came prepared with the paper after I visited my dad in Kelowna a few weeks ago, because I kind of knew that Ross and I had been back and forth on Instagram about when this date might work out to be on the show. So I made sure to talk to my dad about the days of old with the Senators, and he gave me this paper to bring onto the show. So I'm glad I was able to give you guys that relic.
Nice.
I love it, man. That's classic. Final question for me is a bit more of a hard hitting question. I feel like I'm like the bad cop here, and Billsy's the good cop, just giving you soft.
Classic. Yeah.
All right, where are you at with DJ Smith? You feel like stability reigns supreme, or is it time for a change?
Yeah, that's another tough one. I mean, if you asked me a couple weeks ago, I would have wanted him out yesterday. But I think, after Steve Staios had that meeting with the players, I don't think he's going anywhere, at least until we get a new GM. So that's probably looking like the new year. I feel like the opportunity to let him go would have been like right when they got rid of Pierre. Get rid of both of them at the same time. And the team wasn't doing great. Pierre obviously made that big mess up with the league. So I don't know. I mean, hopefully Steve's got a plan. I kind of trust the guy. He seems like a smart hockey guy, and Michael Andlauer seems to know what he's doing as well. So I feel like for once the team's headed in the right direction from top-down leadership.
Steady Stevie Staios, and we got calm, cool, and collected Colin. Really appreciate you being a Sens Central citizen, man. Keep repping the Sens on the left coast, man, and we'll do this again down the road.
Thanks, guys. And I got to say, you guys do a great job with the show. I've checked out a few of the other Locked On teams just for giggles, and I got to say, you guys are definitely one of the best. So keep up the great work. Love the show.
Hope you enjoyed this week's Sens Central Citizen. Coming up next, we've got our top Swedes in Senators history. You're listening to Locked On Senators.
Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Sleeper. If you want to win 100 times your money, play daily fantasy hockey on the Sleeper app, guys. There's so many scenarios that can lead you to winning, and you have a chance of winning big if you play daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper app for our friends down in the States. As the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network, Sleeper is the top choice for daily fantasy sports, whether you want NFL, NBA, MLB, college football, and of course NHL. You can find it on the Sleeper app. You can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey content. There are so many fun things about Sleeper. They've got the group chat where you can talk smack to your friends, let them know you got a big week coming, and entries can be made fast. In under a minute, you can get your lineup. With studs like Brady Tkachuk, Claude Giroux, Jake Sanderson, Drake Batherson, all these guys, all you need to do is pick stats like goals, assists, plus minus, saves, and more. You heard me, Sens fans, 100 times payout on the Sleeper app, so start paying attention and get your picks right so you can win big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Available only for our friends in the States for now.
All right, Pillsy, here we go. The best Swedes in Senators history. And may I begin this conversation with a pat on my own back, calling Daniel Alfredsson as the winner of the Sens Padel tournament. That was a no-brainer for the 50-year-old.
Hey, Ross, look, Daniel Alfredsson, definitely, that's a guy we know is good at the paddle sports, but I was right there with you. I had Eric Brandstrom, and he came second. And this wasn't a Mickey Mouse tournament here where they just paired the best players together. Ian Mendes said in his article, they switched the partners every game, and your points kept going for each individual. So Daniel Alfredsson and Eric Brandstrom truly are the greatest paddle players on this Senators organization right now.
And they're both Swedes, which brings us to the conversation surrounding the best Swedish players in Ottawa Senators history. I honestly was surprised that there aren't more than 30 Swedes in Sens history. It feels like there's been so many impact Swedes in the organization. There are 24 players and 6 goalies who have worn the Senators uniform, who come from the beautiful country of Sweden. There are 2 that are head, shoulders, knees, and toes above everybody else in Daniel Alfredsson and Erik Karlsson. But I think the conversation that starts at 3 is pretty heated all the way to 5 when you try to decide who was the biggest impact Ottawa Senators when it comes to Swedes.
Yeah, and I mean, that question really comes down to what era of Ottawa Senators hockey you followed, because some of the previous areas, like there's one guy on there, Ross, and I don't want to spoil it, but that I didn't really know at all. And I learned that he was a big part of the Ottawa Senators franchise and one of the Swedes that had played a lot of games here. So that was interesting to me. But for me, it's sad, but Mika Zibanejad is that third guy. It's a bittersweet thing because when he was here, he was looking good. He was looking promising, but we all know how that turned out. And now he's an absolute stud on the New York Rangers.
For me, number 3 is a no-brainer. It's Magnus Arvidsson. I mean, almost 400 games played. You can't discount the fact he played 112 more regular season games and way more playoff games than Mika Zibanejad. Yeah. And he was always just Mr. Reliable. The machine, they called him. Great player. And, you know, it sucks that the first thing you think of when you think of Magnus Arvidsson, at least for me, is the unfortunate play against, I believe, the Philadelphia Flyers. But he was skating down the wing, and speed was one of his biggest assets. And the door was open on the Flyers bench, and he got hit and went like full tilt into it. Oh, brutal collision. But overall, like, look at plus 102 in 309.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That's an astonishing. I think that's third in Sens history behind Daniel Alfredsson and Wade Redden. I'm pretty sure. I'm going to double
check. Yeah.
I've actually got the stats up here, the all-time Sens stats. Plus minus leaders all-time. Zdeno Chara, plus 109.
Should have known that, yeah.
I get a future Hall of Famer. So 2 Hall of Famers and Wade Redden, the only 3 players with a better plus minus than Magnus Arvidsson. Just a machine. So I've got him at number 3 for me. And before we get to your number 4, because I don't think he's going to be on my list. He's right there. But Andreas Dackel was the one that you aren't too familiar with, right?
Honestly, I'll hand up. I had never heard of Andreas Dackel, to be honest. So that was a guy that really surprised me to see that he played 401 games and is right up there with some of the top Swedes in Senators franchise history.
Yeah, it's easy to forget guys who then go play their last years in Montreal after playing for Ottawa, you know?
Yeah, that must have been it.
But he had a 50-point year in 98-99. Andreas Dackel had 50 points in 77 games that year. So he was one of those guys where he was like a jack of all trades. From what I remember, I was obviously, 6, 7, 8 years old when he started playing for the Ottawa Senators. But yeah, third in scoring behind Yashin and McEachran that year. So you look at a situation, there's some guys injured. Alfie only played 58 games that year. But with Dackel, yeah, he was always like Mr. Reliable from what I remember. So yeah, for a guy who was a 6th round pick, Sens did pretty well on 6th round picks on Swedes. I think I'm learning that mid 90s. He could be in this conversation, but for me, yeah, I'd probably go Mika Zibanejad just based on talent. He's the highest drafted Swede, obviously, they've ever had, 6th overall. So I think I go Mika Zibanejad at number 4. Okay. Are you going with Arvidsson at 4, or are you going to throw a complete curveball here?
No, I think we just have 3 and 4 flipped, which is totally fair.
So who's number 5 for you?
Look, hashtag goalie friendly show, and Ross, you can swipe over to the page of Swedish goalies in Ottawa Senators history. And, maybe this is just a bit of recency bias, but I wanted to get Anton Forsberg on this list here. Sure, Robin Lehner, obviously much more pedigree, but Robin Lehner was part of that trio of goalies where the Ottawa Senators had to make a decision when they had Lehner, Anderson, and Bishop, and we all know how that went. Bishop ended up playing only a handful of games and was shipped out of here. And Lehner, while he was here, he was a good goalie, but for Anton Forsberg to be a waiver wire pickup, and he also has the most games played, most wins, most shutouts. So I felt it was worthy to give him a nod as one of the best Swedes in Sens history, especially you got to have someone from the current team on there. So that's where I went with number 5, Ross.
That's cool. This is kind of like more of a, your own personal pick. I mean, the whole list is, but you can go so many different ways. Like the list really opens up at 5. Like Robin Lehner was one of my favorite goalies growing up. Just the fire that he played with.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I like that. 914 save percentage is good. We need to give a little love to Anders Nielsen too. It sucks the way that it ended, but he came in maybe at the lowest of low for this organization, and was somehow an even 20-20-2 record in 41 starts with the Senators. Like, compare that. Him and Magnus Hagberg played almost in the same era. You could argue that the team was potentially worse when Anders Nielsen was here than when Hagberg was here. And I mean, Hagberg had 9 wins in 42 games, 35 starts. So
My guy.
to get that done, a 911 save percentage for Anders Nielsen, and a great setup, like one of the best setups in Sens history with the Brian's Beast. Looks so sharp. Always had the great bucket on as well. So he's not number 5 on the list. I'm going to go back to the player list.
Just quickly, though, on Nielsen, though, and what I love about Nielsen too, Ross, hallway trade. I get the hallway trades. That is such a wild thing for me, and I love seeing that. He was traded from the Vancouver Canucks literally on the day that the Sens were playing the Canucks. That's the old Melnick era, trying to save on travel costs.
Duchesne did the same thing.
Yeah, that's a timely reference with the Sweden trip as well.
It certainly is. I'm going to go with Silfverberg. No, I'm not. Nice. But I played 48 games. He can't be the 5th best. He can't be above.
You loved Silfverberg, though. You got to be one of the few guys that have a jersey.
I got to be one of the few guys who have a Jakob Silfverberg jersey. If you have one, comment on the YouTube. I want to, find my people out there. No, I am going to go with Andreas Dackel. I just think the 400 game plateau, 180 points, like, he's so far ahead of anybody else in point totals that we haven't mentioned so far. So I know it's probably a boring answer. And I was actually surprised that the Senators didn't have a goalie from Sweden based on, all the success that the Senators have had with Swedes playing for them.
Anton Forsberg, what are you talking about? Jeez.
I mean, man, he's at 81 starts. I'm surprised that there's not a guy with 100 starts, Philly franchise could have been that guy, but obviously things went off the rails there. But no, who's going to be the next big Swede for the Ottawa Senators, I think is kind of, the question here. Nobody really in the pipeline that's like, a surefire top 6, top 4 defensemen. Oscar Pettersson, Philip Nordberg are the two kind of next in line Swedes. Oliver Johansson as well. So
Kevin Riedler,
there you go. So there are some Swedes coming up in the mix, but one of them is going to have to take a quantum leap forward to make the top 5 list of Swedes in Senators history. Let us know your list in the comments below. Leave a review on Apple. They go a long way to helping the show grow. Follow us on social media at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. Pilsy, your final thoughts on today's show.
Final thoughts for me are the Belleville Senators. We did a recap for them in yesterday's episode. They are up against the Laval Rocket tonight. So if you're looking to get your Senators hockey itch, if you can't wait one more day, check out Belleville Senators up against Laval.
You going to be watching, you going to be locked on to Yuri Smeykal tonight?
Yeah. Hey, I have high hopes for Yuri Smeykal. I didn't mean to diss him last episode. I just thought not exactly the start he or Sens fans were hoping for.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that newly formed top line of Angus Crookshank with Yuri Smeykal and Igor Sokolov. So enjoy the day, Sens fans. We'll tweet out some clips from tonight's game, the Belleville Sens taking on the Laval Rocket. But for today, we say goodbye. Tomorrow's a game day. Reminder, early drop, 5 a.m. drop. Tomorrow's episode, LOSP. We'll see you then. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.